Hello class, welcome to our lesson today dealing with section 3.4, which is solving equations using multiplication and division. Remember on our last class period, we talked about how to solve equations with addition and subtraction. Today we're going to be talking about how to solve with multiplication and division. The ideas are very similar about doing the opposite operation, and so hopefully that will make sense by the time we're done today. First thing that I want to look at is just making sure we're clear when answers are negative. Remember when you multiply 1 negative times 1 positive, that'll be a negative answer, whereas if you multiply two negatives together, it will be positive. Also remember that fraction bars are just division questions. So if you take 108 divided by negative 12, you just take 108 divided by negative 12 for this fraction bar, and then the answer would be negative. So here's all these 6 answers. Just make sure you're understanding where they came from, how to solve them, how to plug them in, for example, on a calculator, or how to solve them by hand. And make sure you know when the answer should be positive or when it should be negative. Okay, we're just going to do a little bit of algebra style work in terms of a setup, and then off to the side I have the algebraic work in terms of how you would set this up and solve. First things to look at is this is 3x, so there's 3 of those variables, and then equals negative 12, so there's 12 of these negative squares on the right side. And if you're just trying to find what one of them equals, essentially you just cut it into 3 equal pieces. So if it was 3x equals something, to figure out what 1x is, or x equals, you just divide this into 3 groups and it should be through 4 negatives. So the idea here is that I take 3x and I need to get this coefficient in front of x to be a 1. That would allow me to say x equals something. Remember, 1x is the same as x. So the only way to do that is to get the number in front to be a 1, and 3 divided by 3 would do that. So I have to divide by 3 on both sides. I get an answer of 1x equals negative 4, but I'm never going to write 1x. I just write x equals negative 4. Your work should look like this. You could write it horizontally, you could write it vertically, but you need to have some work shown about the steps. I don't care how easy the question is, that's the requirement for these questions. This next one is 8 on one side and 4x on the other, dividing it by 4 equal groups. Notice I have 8 equals 4x. If it bothers you to have the variable on the right side, you could move it to the left. And you divide by 4 on both sides, and you get x equals 2 or 2 equals x. Those are the same. This one you have 6x equals negative 12, divide into 6 equal groups, so divide by 6 on both sides, x equals negative 2. You need to write the original problem for your homework, divide or multiply or whatever you're going to do to show your step, and your answer. Those 3 things are the requirement for this assignment, not just x equals negative 2, for example. Okay, this next question has division, so it's d divided by 5. So to get rid of division, you have to do its opposite kind of counterpart, which is multiplication. So you would multiply by 5 on both sides in this case. This is one of the cases when there's a fraction involved. I typically tend to write more horizontally. You might think that it might be easier to write vertically, but with fractions, the reason that horizontally might work better is because you can cross-simplify things if needed. So multiply by 5 and divide by 5 cancel, and you're left with d on the one side. Negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. This one, it's 8x, so divide by 8 on both sides. Now, you could make this a decimal if you wanted, but I just want to make sure that we're clear that fractions can be very helpful in these situations. Negative 6 over 8, so that's negative 6 over 8, which becomes negative 3/4 or 0.75. But a lot of times, fractions might just be easier to even write, especially if you're explaining things or if you have a question that's a non-calculator, for example. Okay, the fraction idea works really well, so keep that in mind as you're looking at these questions. Next, I have z on the right side, but that doesn't affect the question. To get rid of divide by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2 on the other side. So then negative 2 times negative 15 would be positive 30. So that means that z equals 30. That also means if I were to plug it back in the original problem, 30 divided by negative 2 should be negative 15. If you have your steps set up correctly and you know what you're looking at, having a fraction or decimal involved really won't be an issue. So for example, on number 4, I have 3.2n. To get n by itself, I need to get rid of the coefficient. To get rid of that, I'm going to divide by it. So divide by 3.2 on both sides, and then it's negative 0.8 divided by 3.2. You could move the decimal 1 over, okay, and that would make it 8 over 32. You can't have decimals in a fraction answer, though. So if you're going to go fraction route, you got to move the decimal point over to get to 1/4. Or if you're going to have a decimal, it's 0.25. This question, since it starts as decimal, probably would have an answer as a decimal. If it would have started as a fraction, you want to answer as a fraction. Okay, this scenario, number 5, is the one that causes the biggest issues for students. You want to make sure you pay close attention. Okay, let's compare 5 and 6. So 5 has a fraction coefficient, and 6 has a decimal coefficient. The decimal one's a lot easier for students because you could just divide by that coefficient to get rid of it. You could plug that in. You should get a positive 1.1 for this answer on number 6. If you are in agreement that to get rid of this coefficient you have to divide by it, then that's the same thing you should do here. To get rid of this coefficient, I should divide by it. But how do I divide by a fraction? I divide by a fraction by multiplying by its reciprocal. Okay, so we're doing the same thing, but with fractions, we just multiply by the reciprocal because that's how you divide by them. So the reciprocal of negative 3/10 is negative 10/3. I multiply that over to the side, and then I can cross simplify things. Fraction questions are going to be the ones that probably cause the biggest issue, but you need to work on cross simplifying still. Multiply by the reciprocal to get the coefficient get rid of the coefficient and make it 1, and to isolate the variable. This answer should be negative 50 because you have one positive, one negative when you multiply, and you cross simplify a little bit to get negative 50 as your answer. Notice on all of these questions as well, I have like a variable equals something. So h equals negative 50, k equals 1.1. When you're writing your work, that's what it should look like for these assignments. Next thing is just to simplify or to write equations and then solve them. So a number divided by negative 8, notice I have a number, x divided by negative 8. You could use the division symbol, but you want to start working towards a fraction bar, I think, is 7. Then you multiply both sides by negative 8. Your work should look like that. Okay, it should look pretty much the same as what I have written there. The next one, the product of negative 12 and a number, so negative 12 times x would be 60. To get rid of negative 12, you divide by negative 12 on both sides, and you get an answer of x equals negative 5. Some word problem situations. You earn 85 cents per every cup you sell. How many cups to earn so much money? So anytime you have this scenario, it's like price per something times how many you sold equals the total. Notice here I put x equals the number of cups sold. That should be your first step. Define the variable. And then 0.585 times x equals the total. Divide by 0.85 on both sides and get this, 65. The point of all of these questions is not what the answer is. It's the process to get to the answer. Okay, I know the answer is 65, and I know that you can find it probably with other methods, but you need to work on the equation piece, division, and answer. Those are things that you want to work on for these questions. Okay, just a few other pieces, just dealing with setting up equations. Hand cyclists, so the people that can cycle with their hands, if you've ever seen that around campus, for example. 32 feet per second. As soon as you see that per second, so it's 32 feet per second times the number of seconds equals 400. None of these other options make a whole lot of sense with this, so it's got to be this first version. But 32 feet per second times the number of seconds would be the route to take to find that answer. The next one is a little bit tricky because of the way it's worded. They tell you the melting point of radon is negative 96. The melting pot of nitrogen, which is the unknown, that represents the x variable, is means equal to, so it should be nitrogen, x equals 3.6 times the melting point of radon, which is negative 96. So it should be x equals 3.6 times 96, but none of these have that. Okay, they do, it's just disguised. It obviously can't be the addition one. It can't be this multiplication because to get x by itself, you divide by 3.6 and you're supposed to multiply by 3.6. Can't be this one for a similar reason. This third one here is the answer because when you get x by itself, you'll multiply by 3.6 on both sides to get to the same answer. Okay? It kind of depends on what the situation is. If there's something with is, that should be the equal sign, and then you set up the equation on the left and right from there. This question says a hardware store had a profit of negative $6 million. Now, first off, that's a big problem. That means you lost $6 million. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, this profit, so negative $6 million, is equal to 3/4 of last year. So last year's profit is unknown, that's x. The word of means multiply. So 3/4 of last year would be 3/4 times x. So I have negative $6 million, and I'm just using negative 6, and in the end we say that it's in millions. Negative 6 equals 3/4 of multiplication of x. And then if I had to solve that, I would multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, you got a lot of questions for your homework, but they should go fairly quickly because a lot of them are just these one-step equations where you write the original problem, show your step, and then the answer. Okay, so 1 through 37 odd and 45 is also assigned. You need to make sure you show the original problem, show the setup, show your step, and show your work. as you're going through that. So original problem, show your step, and then x equals or whatever the variable is equals the answer. Have a great day, everybody.